Okay, so in this video, I'll show you how to work with data frames in R. So let's start by reading in some data. So I'll start by making sure that I'm in the correct working directory, and you can do this with the following command. If you're not in the correct directory, that is the directory where you have your data, you can always specify a new working directory like this. Okay, so in my directory I have two files. I have my R script and I have a data file. So to read in this data file, which is a tab separated file, I'll just show you here, where you can see I have a number of columns and a number of rows. So in order to read in this data, I'll use the read table function and write the name of the file. Put the argument header equals true because we have a header line. So this will make sure that this first line is read in as a header or a column names vector that is then used in the data frame. And we will have to specify that the separator between the different cells in the table are is the tabs character, and we do this with the \t. Also, let's have a brief overview of our data. So the data frame is an R object that works really well with tables. Whenever you have some data that is in some table-like structure, the data frame is often a suitable choice. So this is just the first few lines of our data set. So we have the names of our different variables, and then we have a bunch of samples. So each row corresponds to a sample, and each column corresponds to the value in that sample of the given variable. You can get some quick overview of the data with the following commands. You can use dim to get the dimensions. You can get summary to get some summary statistics, or you could perhaps want to know the number of columns and the number of rows. So obviously this is the same as you get in the dimensions, but you might want to extract them separately. So how can we work with the data frame? Well, the data frame in many ways is very similar to the R object called a matrix, but is specifically designed to act well with data that has the structure of some variables and then some different samples. So in the same way as when you work with matrices in R, you can extract a specific value. So let's say we wanted to extract a value from row 3, say sample 3, and we'd like to know what shoe size the person in sample 3 were using. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 3.7, and we print the value, which is 42. Now, as you can see, the first value here specifies the row, and the second value specifies the column. Now, if you like to have the whole column, say the whole row 3, you can just write d squared brackets 3 and a comma, and then just leave the second value empty. And as you can see here, we get all the values of row 3. And you can do the same if you say want to have all the shoe sizes. Then you'd want to extract 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 we'd want to extract column 7. Now, you can also specify specific columns instead of using numbers. So imagine you have a large amount of variables, say 50 variables, and then you might not want to count every time, so you can just specify the name of that variable. So we could also press type shoe, or press we want it to be age, and this is how you do it. You could also imagine that you'd actually like to extract more than one row, say the first 12 rows, and you basically you just use a colon to specify a range from 1 to 12. And pay attention to the way this is indexed. This might differ from what you're used to, depending on what programming language you are most familiar with. But this, in this case, we start at 1 and end at 12, and if we go from say 3 to 5, we'll get rows 3, 4, and 5. So this is quite simple. And obviously, you can do the same for the columns. You can take the first 2 columns, for instance, or you could perhaps take the first 3 rows and only print the first 2 columns. You might also want to specify more than one row, but rows that weren't in a consecutive order. And to do this, we'll use a vector, and you should have been introduced to this vector object in another of our videos, but if not, this is simply a way of creating a list or vector of values. So we could enter, say, row 2, 2, 4, and 6. And perhaps also specify that we only want the age, the sex, and then the ID. And as you can probably see, when I specified the vector here, C, age, sex, and ID, then the order in which these variables, these columns are printed, will actually be the same as I specified here and not as they are in that data frame, which might be nice sometimes. Okay, now this is very similar to the way that you extract features from a matrix, perhaps with the exception that you use these names for the columns. Now you can also do this shorthand when you want to extract columns, and this is because obviously these different variables are sort of the main theme in the data frame objects. So there is a shorthand for this. You can just type the name of your data set and a $, and then the name of that variable. So we could say sex, for instance, and you'd extract the whole sex column. Okay, so these are the main functions you use to extract and retrieve data from your data frame. You can also add new columns to your data frame. So now we have 10 different variables, and we have a bunch of samples in that data set. But it might be that we'd like to add something. So say we'd like to add a column containing the BMI, that is the body mass index of all these samples. So to do this, we will have to use the weight and the height and put into a formula, and then we'd like to apply this to all the samples in the data set. Now this is where the data frame really shows its power. It's really easy to apply all sorts of calculations to all your samples and then create a new variable containing all the results of those calculations. So say we'd like to create a new variable called BMI. Then we will define this d BMI as the weight divided by the height divided by 100 squared. So this is the formula for calculating the body mass index, where we'll use the weight, the height, and the way that the data frame object works is that for each row in this in the data set, this value will be a function that we defined here. So if we take a look at our data set again, then we can see that there has been added a column containing the variable which we defined BMI, and each value in this column corresponds to the values calculated from this formula right here. So this is the most basics of using data frames in R. I hope that you have found this video helpful. Thanks.